so excited to be here with you this morning. And as I mentioned earlier, unfortunately, we don't have Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh, but we have the most wonderful substitution. Evelyn Kung is with us. She's the clinical director of the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. So welcome. Thank you for being available to come back and do this with us. We are going to jump right in here. So got some questions here that have already been sent in, but you guys can still be sending questions in, yes? So the first question is preschool important for children on the autism spectrum? What is recommended, a preschool for children on the spectrum or a neurotypical preschool? The hours of this preschool conflict with my son's ABA hours. As of now, our ABA provider has only mornings available. I would hate to lose them. They're amazing. Okay. This is a great question because there's a lot of different components to this, right?
There definitely is.
And I think this is a typical question for young families with young kiddos.
Yeah, and I think it's a typical question because we all expect our children to go to school.
And the school expects them to come to school, right?
Yes.
And they'll breathe down your neck heavy and hard trying to get you to bring your child to school. Plus, which is a lot of commercials that run on TV and say a child is not successful without preschool, right?
Yes.
So we're all fed this, which is, it's not untrue, but there's some considerations with kids with autism.
Definitely. So with kids with autism, what we know is that they don't learn just like their neurotypical counterparts. And so it really depends on what level your child is at. Being in preschool itself, just putting them in there without anything is not going to be helpful for any kid on the spectrum because we already know that our kids don't learn like other kids. Other neurotypical kids see somebody model their behavior, learn language, pick up information, and our kids have that communication deficit and that social communication deficit of attending to a peer. They have a tendency to attend to what is intrinsically motivating to them. And a lot of times it's not listening to a teacher, an adult, understanding that they want to please authority. All of those concepts are really not there for most of our kids. And so it's important that, you know, when you're working with your ABA provider, your child has to have really basic components in place to be able to really benefit from that preschool setting. If they don't look at peers, if they don't model, if they don't imitate, if they're not understanding instructions, all of those things really are what you're supposed to be getting from preschool. And if they can't do any of those things, then it's not beneficial for the child to be in preschool.
And I want to go so far as, and tell me if I'm exaggerating here, but sometimes it can actually make things harder for the kid.
Oh, it makes it harder because depending on the level, if they have a lot of challenges and a lot of stereotypy, what ends up happening is they get if they're quiet, they just get pushed aside and left alone, and they're good because there's no reported problem behavior, but they're not getting any intervention. They're just sitting in the corner with whatever thing that they want to be attending to, and that's it. And so there's no benefit for those kids. For the kids that are higher functioning and actually have some people skills and observation skills and some language, they go into the setting and they see that nobody wants to do what they want to do. And that is completely disturbing too, because those kids get really angry. And that's typically when those kids actually start admitting behaviors. And they're challenging behaviors because either they're going up to a kid and knocking their Legos over just because they know that's the only way the kid's going to attend to them. Yeah. And it's usually attending by yelling or no, or, you know, the teacher comes over because they're told on. Yeah. Or they're usually, they learn to do all the wrong behaviors. Mm-hmm. And that is a problem because we don't want them to think that the only way they can interact is to be destroying someone's play creation or or knowing that if I come up to someone, they'll walk away. You know, just being used to those types of behaviors, do not want that. But on the other hand, if you have a child who's really high functioning, I have to say, actually for all kids, what they do get from the school, I'm going to be really honest, whether they're higher, lower, or any level of behavior, the one thing they do get from school is they just get used to being around people.
Yeah.
And that is helpful, but that's something they can do later.
Right.
You know, there's a lot of other challenges and barriers that prevent them from learning. And in that one-to-one ABA, especially in that slot where they're really young and their brains are sponges and can learn anything, you want to make that time as useful as possible. And if it is in an ABA program where you can see that they're learning consistently and the most, that's great because when they're young, that's the time when they're not that far behind yet. Yeah. And you can really teach as much as you can during that point. They'll have many years of school to learn other things.
Yeah. I offer up as an example, what happened for us was that at 3, when we were starting ABA, there was a big discussion about school wanted our son for an 8-hour program a day. And we were looking at the studies and we wanted ABA. We wanted 40 hours of ABA. And it was quite a tussle. School even sued us. I'm going to be honest about that. They filed suit against us because I was throwing studies around, and I think they wanted to shut me up. I can't know that for sure, but that's how I feel. In any case, we made the decision and decided to do intensive ABA in that first year because he wasn't ready to do anything. He couldn't do anything with other kids around. He would chase them and go, and pretend to be a monster, and that was his relationship with other children. So we decided, no, we need to give him some skills first. What somebody had said to me was, imagine if we said to you, we want you to downhill ski and we're not going to teach you how to do it, but we'll put you at the top of the hill, let you go. How successful will you be, and how many times will you be willing to try before you go, no thanks, I don't want to? And that's what it would be like for him going to preschool with other kids. He did intensive at home because that's all that was available to us at the time. I would have loved center. But we did it at home, 40 hours, and a year later, he had been offered the most restrictive environment, was considered moderate to severe. A year later, on that basis that he had from that 40 hours of card, he was reevaluated and offered full inclusion in preschool, which was amazing. That was miraculous. So at 4, he did go to preschool, and he was ready then, and was so successful in preschool, and then went to kindergarten on time with neurotypical peers, with an aide, but on time with an aide. And I always think back to that first year, and if I had listened, and I'm a former teacher, I have nothing against schools, but if I had listened to the school in that year, I don't think we would have gotten where we got.
Yeah.
But it's really, as you said, it's dependent on the child, where they are, where their skill set is at. At 4, he was craving other children and wanting to be around them. It was exactly, and Card pointed that out to me and said, no, he's ready now. But he had not been ready the year before.
And the thing is, when you look at neurotypical development, when you look at all the developmental skills for just any child, one of the sections of development that they look at is readiness, school readiness. And there's a lot of things in there that a lot of schools will look at when they're doing those developmental evaluations and saying, like, are you ready for school? And if you use that same developmental evaluation for our kids on the spectrum, they don't have those skills. Yeah. So they're not ready for school. And the thing is, we as a society are just programmed to think that school is going to be beneficial. And it is. I mean, I'm a fully, when school works, it really works. But if your child's not ready for school and they need an alternative way to learn, and they need an alternative way to get those school readiness skills, you want to give it to them, because it's actually not fair to put them in a setting without those readiness skills that neurotypical kids are evaluated for, and just say, here, just try, just go. And for me, I want school to be a really good experience for all kids. And so many times our kids go to school and they just have really bad experiences and they don't want to be there. So when I'm working with families and saying, like, is he ready? I always say, yeah, let's get him so ready that once he starts, he's so successful that he wants to be there and he's
loves it.
Succeeding.
Yes.
And he can see all of the benefits right away. And that's why when we do intakes with families, especially the little ones, if the kids are in school, I always ask the parents, is school really helping? Is it beneficial, and how? Yeah. And so many families will look at me and be like, well, no, I don't think he's really learning anything there. It's good that he goes, because that's one thing he's doing, like his neurotypical peers. Yeah. And I would say that, well, let's use the time in another way, because he does have so many years ahead where he will be in school. Yeah. But
school should never be a place where we park our kids at any age, at any ability. And if you feel that and I know parents all the time will write in and say, I feel like that's what's happening, that my child has been parked. We never want that, but especially in the beginning when we're setting a tone. That year that we took and did the intensive ABA, then when he went to school, he was excited to go to school. He couldn't wait. He didn't know his days of the week yet, but he learned them because he was like, is it a school day? Is today a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday? Because then it's a school day. That's the kind of thing we want to see from kids. And when they're ready, it should be that.
Yeah. And then the other part of this question was, should you go to a school with kids on the spectrum or not?
Yeah.
And when we're talking at preschool, it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, which is, can they learn from other kids? And a lot of times what I always joke about is one of the first lessons that we teach kids coming into an ABA program is just basic non-vocal imitation. It's just, let's do what I do. And I actually spend a lot of time with kids teaching them this, because even if a kid does not speak, if you can teach them to imitate their peers, that parent can take them to any birthday party, can take them to any event, because they see other kids jumping, they go jump. They see other kids doing arts and crafts, they will just go do it. They may not like it after a while, but they know what they're supposed to be doing, because they automatically, the imitation is so generalized and so automatic that the parents always tell me, wow, he just went and did what the other kids did, and it didn't matter that he doesn't have any vocal speech.
Right.
You know?
Right.
And especially at that age, there are a lot of kids who can talk but don't too. So it doesn't actually look outside of the norm.
Yeah.
And so when we teach kids in an ABA program how to imitate at that level, you really actually do not want them in with those kids that have all the spectrum behaviors, because they go to school and they learn how to flap their hands and throw things and do things that maybe was not a part of their repertoire at all.
Right.
And, you know, I know that there are all different types of schools out there. There are ABA schools out there. There's a lot of different things. But I always just say, like, if you have taught your kid how to imitate and to really learn from anybody, most of the families will choose not to put their kids with the kids that have the non-typical behaviors, because when they can put their kid with a typical behavior and their kid blends right in, you know, with or without speech, it's just an amazing thing. Yeah. And the kids actually, when they have that imitative ability at such a high level, they actually stay with their neurotypical peers for pretty much forever, because they start learning everything in that way. They might not have vocal speech and they might have to learn how to communicate differently, but for the most part, if they're able to do what everybody else is doing, on many ways, they're at par with the kids.
And it's so important for us to all realize that schools still haven't evolved enough. A lot of times they still have this model of let's segregate the kids, and you know, there are some kids that need to be someplace else for various and sundry reasons, whether they have assaultive behavior management issues where they'll hit themselves or another person and it's a safety issue. There are kids that have medical issues. There are kids whose sensory cannot hang in a typical classroom, right? So we're not saying that all children need to be and I used to say that. I used to say, let's include everybody, right? And I now have learned that for everybody, that isn't necessarily the case.
Exactly.
But we do have to be careful and not allow schools to segregate and put individuals on the spectrum, just check a box and they go over here and they're separate. That isn't good for anyone.
And in the same way, you're not going to take a kid that shouldn't be included and include them. Like I saw a parent last week who was insisting that her child be in a typical classroom, and this is a very high functioning girl, and she gets a lot of anxiety, and I could see it just stressing her out completely.
Yeah.
And you know, it's good that she's with her neurotypical peers and she's learned that, but I wanted to give her a break. You know, and I talked to the mom and I said there needs to be a way to give her a break during the day, because she takes in so much, but she doesn't know how to manage it, and that's when the self-injurious behavior comes and everything else. And at a level, she has a lot of abilities, but maybe the full day, you know, included schedule is not for her, at least at that moment, until we teach her to manage some of these anxiety behaviors.
We really, I mean, an IEP it stands for Individualized Education Planner Program, and a lot of times that people try to automate things to make it easier and faster, right? But we can't. We have to stop and consider this individual being, what would be right for them. And I know sometimes it's hard to convince a school because they create a program. And it's like, these kids fit this program. And a lot of times the program doesn't fit any kid, right? As parents, we have to advocate and go, no, it's called an IEP for a reason. Here's what my child needs. We're not trying to fit my child to a program. You got to fit your program to my child.
Yeah, and I think that's a misnomer that is, a lot of families just feel like, or they're told by the school, no, your child has to do X, Y, and Z. And then the other voice comes where when they get to us, like this morning even, 7 a.m., I got a call from a parent. School already started in some parts of the country.
Yeah.
And she called and she's just like, my child's going to high school, and she went to the class and she's a model, like kid, but she's in a special education placement and she hates it there.
Yeah.
Completely. And we need to find something else for her. And this is high school.
Yeah.
And I just said, okay, let's figure out another model.
Yeah.
Let's use some school time, some this time, some that time. And I was like, what are you open to? And the mom was just saying, oh my goodness, I didn't even know. And this is a parent who's really well educated. But I just said, no, let's just make her time, wherever she is at, the most beneficial as possible.
What a great way of looking at it. We're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to come back with a question that's just come in about someone wants to know, will my son get better? He was diagnosed at 2 years old. And there's more to it, but I think that's the heart of every parent's question, right?
Yeah.
Is my child going to get better? Where are we going to end up? So we're going to come back and talk about that and some more questions that you guys have written in. Stick with us. We'll be right back after these messages. Parent to parent, you might be asking yourself, how on earth can I afford ABA therapy for my child? Well, the short answer is you can't. No one can. It's really expensive and it's overwhelming to most families. But the story doesn't end there, fortunately. The first thing that I want you to think about is tapping insurance resources. So many insurance companies are paying for ABA therapy right now. So that's your first best bet. Make sure and see if your insurance company is providing benefits for ABA therapy, and check back often. Now, if you see that you don't have insurance right now for ABA, don't panic, there are still other resources. The next place to go is to your local support groups and ask them what local resources there are. That's a great place to ask for information, because often states and even counties have support for ABA. And then beyond that, you might consider applying for grants. There are many fabulous grants out there to help you to get support for your ABA therapy. But most important, it's absolutely essential that you get ABA services for your child. We know that that's essential for all of our children, and that you won't be able to do it on your own. So seek out those services and support groups that will help you to fund your ABA journey. It's really important to remember that all behaviors happen for a reason.
Hey, I'm Candace Cameron Bray.
Tom Bergeron.
You're watching Autism Live.
And you're watching Autism Live.
And you're watching Autism Live.
You're watching Autism Live.
We're back, and we're here with Evelyn Kung. She is the clinical director for the Center for Autism and Related Disorders, and she's answering your questions. Now, we had a question that came in on Facebook. Somebody wants to know, will my son get better? He was diagnosed at 2 years old. Will he get better as he gets older? And they're watching right now, so we can ask them questions, and they can write back into us.
Okay. It's amazing technology.
Isn't it? Awfully fun.
It just depends what intervention he gets. It really, really does. I mean, I'm an ABA provider. I know other people who are anti-ABA. And the honest effect is that ABA is the only research-backed therapy that shows that it works with the kids. And for me, the younger the kids get intervention, the more improvement you see. In every level, every child, no matter how severe or not severe, every child who's really young, you want that intensive therapy, and you want a lot of it. Yeah. Like, you just need to get as much as possible, because these kids all can learn. They just learn very differently. And it's figuring out your child and figuring out, like, what are his strengths? Is he a visual learner? Is he an auditory learning? Are there delays? Is there auditory processing delay? And just figuring those things out. And so a lot of times, if you get the right intervention, he will get better. How much better? Like, how independent he will be? We don't know that. But the thing is, every child actually with good ABA makes progress, every single one. And we've seen kids come in with severe challenges, both like on the biomedical end and in the learning end, but they still make improvement. And the goal that we have here at CARD is that, hey, you know what, we'll take any person and we'll try to figure out how they learn. And once we figure out how they learn, then it's all about teaching them, starting with the things that matter to the child,
Yes.
so that they have the motivation to do that type of learning. And then once they can do the things with, that really motivate them, then we start slowly generalizing to maybe what, the household wants or needs, and then society. But it really is one step at a time, but it's really doing something right now.
Can we talk a little bit about the science some more too? Because I apologize up front, but years ago, a mom that my son had been in kindergarten with her daughter, she came up to me in a grocery store and she said, now my son has been diagnosed. And she said, Shannon, I know you know about this, so what should I do? And I was so polite to her and I said, well, you really want to consider doing an intensive ABA program, and you really want to consider doing 40 hours because he's so young, and you really, and I voiced it all in that way. 2 years later, I ran into her again, and I thought she came running across this facility towards me, and I thought, oh, she's going to come and hug me for my brilliant advice. And she came over and with her finger pointed and yelled at me, and she said, how dare you? You made it sound like, well, I could do this or I could do that, and you knew better. You knew that I needed to take such action that it was like the same as if my house was on fire. Why didn't you tell me? You have to do this, and you have to do it now, and you're going to have to fight for it. But if you do, your life will change and your child's life will change. Why didn't you give me the 411? And she said, don't you ever talk to me again. I came to you and I asked you. So I just apologize now to parents and say, I don't mamby-pamby. You need to look at the science. That what Evelyn just said is absolutely true. Every single child who gets good quality ABA will make progress.
Definitely.
Definitely. But the science shows that at 2 or 3 or 4, if you jump in and you do around 40 hours of good quality ABA and you get involved so that they're every waking hour, that roughly somewhere between 42 and 49% of those kids never need anything ever again after a few years, between 2 and 5 years of that intensively. Now, that's almost half. Mm-hmm. That's significant.
Yes.
To me as a parent, that's like, don't walk, run, get this started, because it will be the best parent training you've ever done and your child will make progress. All kids don't get to that point, but a lot of them get to a point where they lead full, rich lives.
Definitely.
With a little bit of support. And then there's another group of kids that usually have, they're twice exceptional, or they have comorbidities where they have other things besides autism. And they still make tremendous progress. Things like toileting, things that affect the rest of their lives.
Yeah, I always say that the most challenged kids that come in, when they leave, usually we always say, we've got them a way to communicate. And if a child has a way to communicate, they don't have behaviors, like
That's
severe
right.
behaviors. Severe problem behaviors are not there if they can communicate what they want and need. They usually have a lot of the independent skills, so eating, sleeping, toileting, all of those, so that they can be as independent as possible and they're not relying on somebody else. And if they can have those two components, they can actually go and live in any environment.
Now, we had a follow-up that came in from this parent, and I thank you for writing in and saying what the issue really is so that we can really attack this. She says, most of us can't afford ABA, and that's the issue. I'm sending you an air hug, because it's not most of you, nobody can afford ABA. If people had to pay out of pocket for ABA, I don't know anybody who could afford this. And that's not your fault. It's a problem. Mm-hmm. Are you here in the United States? That's my next question to you, and write me back as quick as you can, because if you're here in the United States, most of our children have access to insurance now in the United States where you can get ABA, whether it's through Medicaid or private insurance, and there are places that you can get grants to pay for the co-pays. And let me just tell you, I am happy to be on the phone with you privately, and we'll figure out what is available to you, because more is available to you than you currently know.
And this is a good time, because right now, pretty much almost everybody has some kind of level of access to it.
But you may not know it, and that's very common still, that things have changed and things have shifted and you have access. You're in Texas. I got you. Please, send me an email right now, and then you and I can talk personally later on. And there's my email, s.penrod@autism-live.com. And let's get you hooked up with some resources so that you can see all the ways that other people will either pay for this or help you to pay for it. Because we can't allow money to stop you from getting the thing that you want. And there are grants, there is insurance, there is Medicaid, there's a DARS grant in Texas to get you started. There's all kinds of things.
And it's rough and it's hard to get.
It is rough.
It is very rough.
It's going to be a fight, but it's possible.
But there is a possibility there. And right now is a good time because there are these things. This time, I always tell parents, if you're thinking about doing it later, this might not be available to you later.
That's absolutely
We do
true.
not know where the whole realm of finance and ABA is going.
Yeah.
So I tell people, do it now because in 5 years, they may not be here.
And now, if you've got a 2-year-old that's aging towards a 3-year-old, that's the window where you can have the best expectation for the best possible outcomes if you start now. So email me and let's have a conversation so that we can get you moving in that direction. And for those of you who are watching who are like, yeah, but I don't live in Texas and I don't live in the United States, I want to say that there are other things in place where you can get started anyway.
Yeah.
Before there was insurance, there were families that went on their own, and they got, we know Kiwanis clubs that have sponsored a kid. We know sororities that have sponsored a kid where the parents had materials, books back then, but now we've got e-learnings for you where you can train a team. You can make this happen one way or the other. Parents have done it.
I had a parent who went to the local college. It was a liberal arts college near their house in the middle of the country.
Yep.
Really out and far away. And got a professor it was an occupational therapy class. Mm-hmm. And basically got her son to be the practicum site. So,
amazing.
So we had all these students come in for a couple of years, and they were there for 2 years, and they got college credit. And so the family didn't have to pay anything, but the family just paid for the card fee for the supervision and the training. But otherwise, like the whole staffing of the 40 hours was fully funded by a school of students.
Amazing.
And it was amazing. And those students, when they went away and they came back, and they said they got hired so fast because in all of their occupations, and in that group it was OTs, some teachers, and some special ed teachers, they all knew how to handle kids.
Yeah.
So they got recognized so fast that they knew exactly how to motivate a child to do anything, that it really benefited them later in life. But this family was amazing that they got this to happen. So it takes a lot of creativity and a lot of endurance and not giving up. But there are ways that you can get it funded. We've had families, who are overseas. And we actually had a family who was here who moved back to India because in India, there's a whole population of people who don't have jobs. And you can pay them at a fraction of the cost of here. So they just pay for the supervision, and then their 40 hours for their child was at a much lower rate in India. You know, so there's a lot of different ways to do this.
And it's about getting creative. But I have to say to you, lots of parents have done it before you, so you don't have to reinvent a wheel. But if this is an issue for you, don't let money stop you. It will be the biggest heartache for you down the road when you see other kids making progress and you think, oh, how did we not have that? Nobody has the money for it. It's not just you. We all have to figure that out, and lots of parents have been figuring it out. So, call me or write me. Call me. You know how to do it. Call me. Okay. So, and we did have another person who wrote in on YouTube and said, my child is autistic and has ADHD. How do you treat that? It's pretty much the same things that we've been talking about. Your question when I said this to you in the break was, you said, how old? Because it makes a difference.
It makes a difference, the age of the child. Because there's a component of ADHD that the inattention is not actually really ADHD. It's just a part of the autism, the executive functioning deficit. Their inattention, their ability to follow and be able to focus. There's a whole subset of ADHD kids here, neurotypical ADHD, that actually have visual perception deficits. And people think that it's inattentive because they're just moving around and can't focus. But the minute you get actually their vision tested and you realize it's a vision issue, that there's training and vision therapy and everything for all their perceptual skills, and suddenly they can attend now.
Yeah.
And so there's all these different forms of what's ADHD out there. But when you get a real pure ADHD kid and ASD kid, I was telling Shannon, oh, I love these kids. Because these kids are so fun and so creative. They're exhausting, but they're so fun. And it's just like figuring out a way, like depending on their age, how to get them integrated in. You know, like if this child needs to be moving, then let's figure out how in that second grade classroom they can keep moving while doing their work.
Yeah.
You know, and I had a kid who could do work if she was standing up,
Yep.
but she couldn't do work if she was sitting. She
Yep.
could not sit for the life of her. And she was my true ADHD kid.
Yeah.
But so we had to actually put into our IEP that she's allowed to stand up.
And we, even in the office world, we see this now, that there are some people who are more productive if they have a standing desk.
Yes.
Some people need it because their back has issues, but some people greatly prefer it.
Yes.
You know, honestly, we had a producer on the show who loved to stand. Our control room wasn't set up for this, but he loved to stand. He was working here a year before we got him to sit in the chair and call the show from a chair. It was just how he preferred it. And there's nothing wrong with that, right?
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with it.
But you know, we as a society need to be a little bit more flexible.
Mm-hmm.
We always teaching flexibility to our kids, but we need to be flexible. So I love this.
Yeah, so it just depends on the age and because as you age, the requirements for you to really focus and be, you know, just in a setting for a long periods of time really does increase. If they're really young, I always say if they're coming in at 3, 4, 5, are they really ADHD? I don't know. Because a lot of times it's just the autism part where they're just inattentive or they don't know how to wait, you know, and so it's teaching them that aspect and suddenly they don't have the ADHD diagnosis anymore.
Yeah.
But then you get into the school age where you see that this kid just does better if he's standing or if he gets a little break in between, you know, where he's able to walk around. And then you start working with the IEP team saying, how can we integrate all of this in? Because these kids are the most creative. The ADHD kids are so creative. It's amazing.
Love it, love it, love it. I'm so glad that you're here to answer this next question because I've come to you with this before. Somebody wrote in and said, I would like to make an appointment to see the therapist, ABA. Can I call to make appointment or do I have to go online? It's too difficult. Here at Card Now, we have a portal. When you go online, there's the place where you can click on it to begin the process of saying that you want to have somebody seen by somebody, you want to start ABA therapy. But it's not everybody's preference, but it's not the only way that they can do things. And so I know you had helped me once before. What would be your best advice if somebody is there and they're not an online person?
If they're not an online person, I would say pick up the telephone. Or if there's a local office near you, go and just say, hey, I'm not. Be really honest, you know, and a lot of times you walk into these ABA companies and everybody's in their early 20s and you wonder, like, who is this 20-year-old? And I remember being told that.
The 20-year-old,
the 20-year-old. I'm not anymore, but it's like walk in and just say, hey, you know, I'm not an online person and I just need another help. And we will provide another way, whether it's you to go in person and somebody helps you put everything into the computer, or if you want to call and just have a discussion on how this works. You know, just there are other ways of doing it. A lot of people say, oh, it's so cold. Actually, I've had parents say it's so cold to go through the computer. And I say, you know what, the purpose of the computer is so that you can enroll at any time.
Yeah.
You know,
Even
it's open 24 hours a day, so you can be doing this at 2 a.m.
Yeah.
Because if you have a child on the spectrum, you don't have time.
Right. That's sometimes the only time that you do have. And I will say, too, if you need to, you can always email me if you need help figuring something out. But if you get to the 20-year-old person, and believe me, I love 20-year-olds. Right, but a lot of times there's this shades of gray thing that I notice with that somebody will be told at 20, here are the rules. And what I love about 20-year-olds is they're like, those are the rules. And they miss shades of gray sometimes with the rules. The rule may say at any ABA provider that you must enter online, right? That doesn't mean that you have to.
Yeah.
So if you meet a 20-year-old who says, no, I'm sorry, the only way to do it is online, ask for somebody else. I always love on Oprah, they would always talk about don't take a no from somebody who wasn't authorized to give a yes. that don't be afraid to ask for accommodations. It's really good practice for all of us to have the opportunity to say, I'm going to need something different. I have to do that in my life. I hate it whenever I'm someplace at an IEP or whatever, where somebody starts reading something that I need to be able to make a decision on, and I don't have it to look at, and there's other noises. I can't do that. And I always say to them, I have to stop you. Can I get a copy of that? Mm-hmm. I'm going to need to have a copy to read along with you if it's that you want me to make a decision here. If you just want me to listen to you and later on I'll make a decision, that's fine too. But if this is time sensitive, you're going to have to give me a copy.
Yeah.
That's the only way it works for me.
And I always say, and this isn't this is anywhere you go in school. I always say that it's frustrating when you encounter these situations. But your best bet is to give a little honey, because
yes,
you have to be really nice to the person. And if you're really nice to the person, they're more willing to help you.
That's absolutely true.
And
but you can give honey while you say, is there somebody else I can talk to?
Exactly. And just
you don't have to be rude.
There's a way to do it in a nice way.
Yes.
And I think that will just, every setting, ABA, school, wherever you are, if you're going to be asking for an alternative, just try to put on your best face and be sweet and just be able to do it. It's so frustrating for so many families. They're like, oh, I'm so tired of this because everywhere I go, I get these roadblocks. And I understand that description, but really, you just get more if you're giving that a little bit of honey.
I absolutely agree. Especially when you think about people who are in this field. I always like to remind myself and other parents that people who are working in the field of autism chose to be in this field because they want to help somebody. They don't want to deliberately make your life miserable. They are on our team.
Yes.
And that doesn't mean that they're always going to give us the thing that we want right in that moment in the way that we want it. But if we remember that we're all on the same team and we just keep the lines of communication as open as we can, be as clear as we can, I think you'll find that, especially in the field of ABA, people are nice.
Yeah.
And that they will respond well to that. I also want to say that Dr. Grampiche wrote in and said that she's watching. She's on a plane going to Seattle. Hello. So I'm going to move, but I love that you're watching. I'm going to move on to the next question. You know how I am. I like to get as much out of you guys as possible. So I've got a question here. My 4-year-old was diagnosed with ASD. He has echolalia, repeats phrases, but can speak when he wants something or wants to show us something. He is taking Resperdal to calm himself and concentrate, is a bit hyper. And they said, how bad is he? And I want to say that this is a thing I think that runs through all parents. It's that thing of, I don't know where my child is. It's one of the reasons why I love Skills. Skills is like your mall map. Once in the mall you go and it's like, well, I want to get to Macy's, but I got to know I'm here first in order to get to Macy's. I don't know of anything else besides Skills that provides that mall map for you for autism. Once you've answered all the questions, you can look on the map and see, okay, your child is here and we want to get here. And then you get an idea of how far away from it you are. We all want to know that. And I know that makes clinicians a little, like, I don't know, nervous when we want to know, like, where is my child?
Clinicians should not get nervous at that kind of
Okay,
question.
good. I'm glad. I'm glad that you
not.
say that.
But I think that, the idea that I think some people do get nervous because a lot of ABA providers aren't trained in development.
Oh.
And I think that's why, like, whenever we get our new BCBA in, a lot of them will ask, like, how do I learn this? And, and I always say, remember that freshman year psych class that talked about development?
Yeah.
This is where the knowledge you're drawing from. But I always say, go and hang out with the kids and you'll figure out what they can do. And then that becomes your standard.
Yeah.
No matter what age, if you know kind of generally what they should be doing, you have that nervousness should not be there.
Okay, so for this guy, for a 4-year-old with ASD that has echolalia, but speaks when he wants something, so he's manding, or wants to show something, and it's great that he's wanting to show something. That's a good sign, right? How does the parent walk away? Is it useful even to know because the parent is asked, how bad is he? I'm using their words.
So I actually don't like that to use how bad is he. I just say where is he. And so in skills, what Shannon was talking about is if you are 4 years old, you take assessment questions up to the age of 5 because that's what a 4-year-old is learning, everything up to the age of 5. Or if you're 2, you're learning everything up to 3. So it gives you an idea versus the general neurotypical child where your child is at. For this child, I would say that if he's able to make requests, vocalize and talk and make requests for what he wants, he's got the basic vocal, so people understand him. So he has basic speech, which is the most common form of communication. If he is knowing when he wants to show you things and talks about things that he wants, that's even more amazing because that means he has some kind of social need to share.
Yeah.
And one of the deficits for autism at a very low level or at 18 months they notice is, the whole idea of joint attention or wanting to share, not always sharing things because you want it, but sharing just to share it and getting that satisfaction from someone else knowing.
Yeah, it's a
so
great sign.
that shows you that he is in tune to a large degree with other people. He wants that, that interaction. He wants to show somebody something that he thinks is amazing. So those two skills together means that he has a lot of potential. He really has a lot of potential. But now a lot of it is probably very concrete. It's very what he's learning. So it's the abstract things, or it's maybe the form of communication and teaching and how it's coming that he's not able to tune in to what he needs to tune into. And that is where ABA really is the solution, because ABA does deliver small components at a time, so it's not coming in an overwhelming force, but it's coming in small components. And if he can fit it into his repertoire and figure out how it fits in, he's going to start using all that information.
Yeah.
And so the idea is that he's not that bad, you know, because he has the core skills of he can talk, and he has that skill of I want to please somebody else, and I want to share what I like with somebody else. And that means he's in tune with other people. That means he's somewhat social.
And so instead of asking how bad he is, really for parents, what we need to start thinking is how much progress can my child make, which really is hand in hand with how much therapy can I get my child as soon as possible.
He needs as much as he can because he can learn, but for some reason the way learning is coming isn't coming the normal way. So now you want him to get as much therapy so he can get just the basics tools. He needs to know what words mean and how to ask questions and how to get information when he doesn't understand what's happening. So he needs all of those skills, because once he gets those skills, he's probably going to be very talkative and want to interact with people.
But you got to get the help and the support, and you really have to do it now, because at 4, you're staring down the barrel at going to school. You don't necessarily have to go to school at 5, but by 6, you got to be at school. And so now you've got more time, and he's not as far behind. Every week that you wait, he's that much further behind. You got to make up that week on top of everything else that he's behind.
And you want to do it now, because at some point, let's say if he starts interacting and people aren't reciprocating, he may choose not to interact.
Right.
And you don't want that to happen.
Yeah.
You want his interaction to be positive, to be momentum, to give him momentum to learn more, to want to interact more, to get that drive. So you really need to give him those basic skills, that basic language, that basic the how to figure out rules in society, and so that he can go out there and do what he wants to do in terms of, share with things with what he wants, and then learn the things that he's really not that interested in either. Just like the rest of us.
Like the rest of us.
Just like the rest of us.
Amazing. Somehow we're out of time. I don't know how that could possibly be, but this has been so much fun, and thank you so much for being here and filling in for Dr. Grampuchet, who, as you just heard, is on a plane. And to Dr. Grampuchet, we miss you, but so thrilled that you were here and able to do this. This
Thank you so
such a
much.
great talk.